In this video, we are going to discuss something that is almost never discussed in Christian theology or even the mythology of the ancient Near East. The primordial gods, on this episode of Ancient Egypt and the Bible. In this series so far, we have talked about the low-hanging fruit of the spirit world. Cherubim, seraphim, demons. But today, we are going to talk about something that is almost never discussed in Christian circles, which is the primordial gods. Now, we need to stress that what we are about to discuss is very complicated and intersects with issues of theodicy and cosmogony. There is no way we can cover all the issues associated with this topic in a short video. So, bear in mind that we are only giving you a skeleton of the topic to give you something to think about and consider. We aren't going to flesh out every detail here, although we have probably thought about those details already. The other thing we need to discuss is when we talk about primordial gods, we're not necessarily talking about the Council of Gods. That's been stressed by Michael Heiser. Okay? That's a different topic, and while it intersects with the idea of primordial gods, it's not the same subject. So we need to make that important caveat as well. Now, the background to what we are going to talk about is what takes place following the creation. The ancient Near Eastern notion of creation is that God creates and spreads out the universe. But as a thinking being, he does not only create an inanimate creation of matter and energy, but a creation that includes beings of mind. So God doesn't create just space, dead matter, lifeless energy. He creates life in his creation at all times. So out of, say, the creation of universe, there are beings that are created also. So when God creates the cosmos, a side effect of his creation is the so-called chaos monsters. The term chaos monster comes from 19th century readings of Enuma Elish, which is a Mesopotamian text that talks about the god Marduk fighting Tiamat, a dragon of chaos. Okay? Now, we have to understand that this is the best term that we have for these particular spirit critters at the moment. However, the viewer should bear in mind that we are having an in-house debate as to the suitability of that nomenclature. So, while we have not yet discussed the chaos monsters, the Bible does explicitly mention them. There are ancient monsters such as Leviathan in Job 3:8, Job 41 verse 1, Psalms 74:14 and 104:26, and Isaiah 27 1-2. Behemoth is mentioned in Job 40:15, and Rahab is mentioned in Job 9:13, 26:12, Psalm 89:10, Isaiah 30 verse 7, and 51 verse 9. Now, in this rubric of God's creating the universe with chaos monsters, God tames the universe by vanquishing, taming, or destroying the chaos monsters. Even though the chaos monsters were agents within the created order, they seem to have had the effect of making creation wild, unpredictable, and untamable. However, where God started with a wild, unbound creation, where chaos was its side effect, he envisioned a progression of created order, where he would have dominion as the sacred proliferated into every nook and cranny of the universe. And mankind was intended to be the instrument of that order, as man was set out to turn the world into a garden that brought harmony and fecundity to creation. Instead of there being a wasteland where thorns and thistles, lions and bears, waste and blight would flourish, the role of man was to be a subduer and sacralizer of the profane. However, mankind had some missteps as he fell and is driven out from the presence of the Lord. See Genesis 3. However, while God being God and man being fallen are the focus of the biblical narrative, there are also some middlemen that are a bit of a footnote in the Bible, but are also part of the story. This is where the primordial gods come onto the scene. The primordial gods don't have an explicit name in Judeo-Christian theology. They are commonly just referred to by the generic moniker of angels, but not any specific type of angel like the cherubim or seraphim. But the Bible does allude to their function in Jude verse 6. Quote, "And the angels who did not keep their own domain, but abandoned their proper abode, he has kept in eternal bonds under darkness for the judgment of the great day." Quote. Now, the key to understanding this verse is, "but abandoned their proper abode." An abode is a place where one dwells, as a domain. Their domain was where they were to exercise their authority. So these were beings that had authority. They had a job. They had a function. They were created to do a purpose and a task. But they abandoned the place where they were supposed to do their work. This is the story of the primordial gods. Now, when we talk about the primordial gods, we are not talking about a god in the same way that we talk about, say, the supreme god or Yahweh. They were lesser spirit critters that were created and lesser in every respect to God, but they're more powerful than humans. Now, while the Bible doesn't talk about these primordial gods to any great extent, they are discussed in other pieces of ancient Near Eastern literature. For example, the primordial gods are described in Egyptian mythology. They sit as part of the cosmogony, and at the same time reside outside of the creation narratives. No cult was ever dedicated to the primordial gods in ancient Egypt, and no temple was ever made for their worship. Nor do most of them even receive names. They are a side effect of the natural order. A particularly notable example here is where the primordial waters gave rise to the egg of Re, the sun god, who hatched and created all other gods. But the primordial gods neither contributed to Re's creation nor participated in any act of creation. They were simply just there. And that's more or less what the primordial gods were. They were placeholders. They were created to uphold the created order after the chaos monsters were dispossessed. In essence, once God gave the chaos monsters the boot, someone needed to fill the vacuum. Otherwise, the created order would experience decay. Now, God could have filled that role himself, but he delegated that responsibility to other spirit critters who could exercise dominion within their own abodes. The only problem was, many of them chose to abandon their responsibility and interfere in the affairs of mankind. So, there you have it, a brief overview of a spirit being that plays a part in the divine drama, but is rarely discussed. The primordial gods. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that and learned something. Thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next time on Ancient Egypt and the Bible.